Okay. So. Is that good? Well, good afternoon. My name is William Johnson, and I have the honor and privilege of serving as the Chief Judge of the United States District Court for the District of New Mexico. So I want to welcome everyone, those here, as well as those watching by Zoom, to this special event to honor Senior United States District Judge James A. Parker and to pay tribute to his 34 years plus of judicial service to the District of New Mexico as a district judge. Now, Judge Parker knew something was up this week. And particularly with all of his family coming into town, something was up. And so, and he kept asking me, and I told him there was going to be some surprises. And I hope that somebody didn't spill all the beans on today's ceremony, and there is a little bit of a surprise, but it was 12 months ago that district judges Martha Vasquez, James Browning, Ken Gonzalez, Key Riggs, Judith Herrera, Robert Brack, and yours truly voted unanimously to name the 6th floor courtroom after Judge Parker. And I say unanimously because when you get a group of trial judges together, as you know all too well, we always don't see eye to eye on things, but we were all unanimous in this decision. Truth be known, this entire building should bear Judge Parker's name, but that takes an act of Congress. So the judges, we decided to take action and do what we had authority to do. And so we are naming the 6th floor courtroom after you, Judge Parker. I think it was in early 2021, I know that, Judge, we weren't seeing, the judges, we weren't all seeing one another on a regular basis because of all the pandemic stuff, but I learned that you were experiencing some physical health issues, not COVID related, but they were nevertheless serious, and you ended up in the hospital, and we were all relieved when you got to go home, but I knew that you weren't recovering physically as rapidly as you'd hoped to. And I remember last summer, you called me over to the house and you told me that you had made the decision to retire. And that was, I know that was a hard decision for you. It was hard for me to hear that. And because anyone who knows Judge Parker has heard him say that when Ronald Reagan appointed him to the United States District Court bench in 1987, it was for a lifetime appointment. And I knew Judge Parker always intended that to him, a lifetime appointment equals a lifetime of service. But we came to a kind of a little bit of a compromise. Instead of retiring, Judge Parker would take inactive senior status, and that had two benefits. One, he would no longer have to file that dreaded financial disclosure report, which while it's one of these statutes that Congress has enacted and is well intended, it's a very cumbersome and bureaucratic process to have to do that. But the advantage of being an inactive senior judge is that you can work 60 days a year and you're still exempt from having to file that financial disclosure report. So I'm optimistic that I'm going to get a call from you this year or maybe next and say, I want to come back and do some work. Now in the program, and I had made this representation, I know to Pam and to others, that Judge Parker was the longest serving district judge in the history of the district. And I knew that Ed Meacham had served 32 years, Colin Neblett had served 33, and I knew you were 34 years plus. But when we started preparing this, I did not realize that your mentor, Howard Bratton, also served 34 years. And we were Judge Bratton came on board in 1964. So it was hard to tell how they counted days of service. And we contacted the AO early this week, and of course we haven't heard back. So that's why this says that you are one of the longest serving judges, because we don't know who had more days, you or Howard Bratton. But if you decide to do some of this inactive senior work and not go 60 days, I bet you can set the record. 20 years ago, I started, and shortly after I joined the court, I get a call from Judge Parker. He was the chief judge at the time, and he asked me what I was doing, I think, not that afternoon, but the next day. And I said, well, my docket hadn't built up yet, so I had some time. And he said, let's go make a ski run up at Santa Fe. And that was a really good snow year. And so we go up to Santa Fe, and this was in January, either January or early February, 2002. And busting the moguls with Jim Parker, I was amazed at, I hear I'm having trouble, keeping up with Jim Parker, and I'm thinking, he's old enough to be my dad, and I'm having trouble keeping up with him on those black diamond runs. And of course, Jim Parker loved to ski as well as, fly fish, and did a lot of running too. I was with Judge Parker when he did the last black diamond mogul run, and that was at Durango. And he took a fall and ended up later on having to have some surgery. But I do want to dispel this notion, because there was rumors flying around. It was not my idea to do that mogul run. In fact, I think it was after some surgery. It was 5 or 6 years ago. There were a group of the judges. We went up to the Durango Ranch, and we went skiing up at Durango, and you were skiing down. It wasn't a black diamond run, but it was one of those intermediate runs, and your skiing form was perfect. And we get down, and we're in the chair line, and you made the comment to me and the other judges who were there that you thought that this was going to be the end of you skiing. And we said, why? And you said, well, my doctor told me that if I fell, I may never walk again. And we were all like, what are you doing out here on the slopes? But I mention this because one of the most admirable qualities that you have is this zest for living life to the fullest extent possible. Now, I have some introductions to make. And first, I want to thank the court staff, our clerk of court, Mitch Elfers, Scott Ferguson, Lydia Piper, Braden McDonald, Cynthia Gonzalez, Jacob Garcia, Kyle Hanks, Edward Contreras, and Derek Lopez, and my paralegal, Ashley Kittrell, for all the work that they put in making this event happen. I also want to thank U.S. Marshal Sonia Chavish and Deputy Marshal Kenneth Daniel, who certainly did a lot to make and help everything come together. And if I left off anybody's name, I apologize. I want to also mention our honored guests. Janice Parker, Judge Parker's wife, Roger Parker, Judge Parker's son, and his wife, Erin Parker, Pamela Parker Jones, Judge Parker's daughter, and her husband, David Jones, and grandchildren, James Parker, Sarah Parker, Emily Parker, Daniel Parker, Jimmy Wallace, Samantha Wallace, Wesley Jones, Katie Jones, Kelsey Jones, Mindy Jones, and her boyfriend, Amon, and I'm not sure if I'm going to pronounce this, Afwegas, And taking your record today is Paul Baca, and Paul came up to me and said, I can make the record inside the courtroom, but I know from talking with Jim and Jay that Paul's like family. So Paul Baca is here today. Also, I want to thank 10th Circuit Judges Paul Kelly and Joel Carson for attending. My colleagues, District Court Judges James Browning and Key Riggs. Judge Karen Molson is here. And also our Chief Probation Officer, Ron Chavis. Now, today's date was selected, I think it was back in probably about September. I'd been talking with Jay and talking with Pam, and then Pam was talking to Roger, and the date of January 7th, today's date was selected because that was the day that worked best for all of Judge Parker's family to come from Denver to get here. And then also it was pointed out to me that tomorrow happens to be your birthday. So this was the ideal time for your family to be here. And honestly, in September, when we started making these plans, I was cautiously optimistic that, well, maybe we would turn the corner on a lot of this COVID stuff. But unfortunately, it's ramped up. And so this ceremony today, there's a lot of, this is a very historical courtroom and courthouse, but this is the first time I'd be willing to put money on the table that there's ever been a ceremony where the most honored and most important people in the ceremony are sitting in seats outside the courtroom. And also, this is the largest courtroom in the district, and we could probably easily fit 250 people in there. And if we weren't in a pandemic, I promise you, we would have had a full house and we would have had overflow on the second floor. But this pandemic's been challenging. For those who are participating by Zoom, thank you. I want to thank the federal bar. They provided food and refreshments. The challenges of the pandemic has also affected the court, and two of our speakers who are going to be speaking today in person, when you factor in the weather in DC, flight cancellations and COVID issues, Judge Laura Cordero is going to be speaking by Zoom, and then Judge Robert Brack. So at this time, I'm going to turn the program over to Judge Laura Cordero, who, by the way, was Judge Parker's very first law clerk when he took the bench in 1987. So, Judge Cordero.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much, Chief Judge Johnson, for affording me the opportunity to speak today. I truly appreciate it. I cannot tell you how honored I am to be speaking to you at this historic event that is happening in this historic courthouse. I'm so sorry that I was not able to be in person with you today. I actually had my ticket and was ready to go, and it just didn't work out. But fortunately, I had the privilege of serving as Judge Parker's law clerk in this very courtroom just after, about a year after his appointment. And looking back now, I fully appreciate the privilege of serving Judge Parker. It really was nothing short of transformative for me, both personally and professionally. And that is not just because I happened to meet my husband in that same courthouse. It started, as many of you have heard, with a chance encounter with the recently retired Chief Justice Warren Burger of the United States Supreme Court, who at the time was leading the 1987 bicentennial celebration of our Constitution. And yes, I realize that was before some of Judge Parker's more recent law clerks were even born, so I'm certainly dating myself. But in the fall of 1987, Judge Parker offered me an opportunity to interview with him at the Hay Adams Hotel in Washington, D.C., where he was attending what we judges sometimes refer to as baby judge school. Gratefully, I accepted the invitation, flying to DC for the day from my law school for the interview. When I arrived at the Hay Adams Hotel, I recognized Judge Parker from the description he had given me. There were very few who towered above him. This was at a time when computers and internet and Google searches were not ubiquitous, so I didn't have a photograph of him. But I knew that it was him, and indeed he was in the lobby of the Hay Adams Hotel at the appointed time, but he was speaking with Chief Justice Warren Burger. I was very young and even more naive, but I knew better than interrupt his meeting. After Justice Burger stepped away, I approached Judge Parker, and he was graciously invited me to dine at the hotel restaurant where we could conduct the interview. So we were seated at a table for two in the dining room, and the interview began. I thought the interview was going well until we were approached again by Chief Justice Warren Burger with his table napkin in his hand. It seems he had been dining at a table nearby. So he asked who I was. And when Judge Parker explained that he was interviewing me for a position as his law clerk, he pulled up a chair and joined us at the table and proceeded to ask me questions about my law school and my activities and my engagement with journals. He then turned to Judge Parker and outlined his criteria for hiring law clerks, and needless to say, it was quite daunting. It was certainly an incredibly memorable meeting of Judge Parker, having had the privilege of meeting him and the former Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. I was so taken by it that, frankly, I confess I don't remember much of what Judge Parker asked me after the grilling I received from Chief Justice Warren Burger. And to this day, I frankly don't know if Judge Parker hired me because he thought I did a good job and passed the interview with Chief Justice Burger, or because he felt so incredibly sorry for me that I had done so poorly that he thought he'd just give me a chance. I don't know, and frankly, either way, I don't need to know. Judge Parker, I am forever eternally grateful that you were willing to hire me. Because in the 2 years that I spent as your law clerk, I learned life lessons that I carry with me to this very day. First and foremost, you taught me to work very hard to make sure you get it right. Judge Parker, as all of you know, has worked tirelessly every day, and at the time when I was his law clerk, every weekend, including holidays. He stayed late into the night and took work home. At one point, he shared with me that he only needed about 4 hours of sleep if he could take a short nap during the day. Quite frankly, given all the time that he was putting into his work, I doubt he was even getting the 4 hours he thought he needed. What fueled his grueling schedule was an unwavering commitment to the rule of law. Through the many cases he has decided in his more than 3 decades of service, his faithfulness to the rule of law stems from his utmost respect for this pillar of our society. The rule of law was the lodestar of his court. It was the legal and moral foundation of the work that we undertook every single day. With every opinion he drafted, every ruling he issued, every decision he made, he gave concrete and effective expression to that fundamental principle. Second, Judge Parker taught me to be respectful always. Being an extraordinary jurist as Judge Parker is, requires a genuine appreciation of how each side views their case. As I watched Judge Parker strive to truly understand the perspective of all the parties in the case, I realized why he is known as Gentleman Jim. He aptly focused on the legal nuances and complexities in each case, but always remembered that behind each case, there are people who come to our courts at a time of crisis, people bearing the weight of litigation, people seeking relief from the court, whether as plaintiff or defendant. He has always treated every single litigant, every single lawyer with the utmost respect and regard. And that is why he in turn has rightfully earned the respect of all of those who have had the privilege of appearing before him. Third, Judge Parker taught me to always be kind. He has an incredible heart, always sharing a kind word, always expressing genuine appreciation. He has adopted, as a member of his extended family, each and every one of the members of his staff, including his administrative assistants, his courtroom clerks, his law clerks, and of course, as the Chief Judge Johnson highlighted, Paul Baca, his trusted and loyal court reporter. Through luncheons, dinners, gatherings, news clippings that arrive in the mail, heartfelt handwritten notes, or calls to get an update, Judge Parker has mentored us, cheered us on as we navigated our professional careers and supported us through difficult times. As his former law clerk, I know that many other coworkers, colleagues, friends, and neighbors have reaped the benefits of his kindness and are grateful knowing that he genuinely cares. And finally, as Chief Judge Johnson noted, he has taught us all to enjoy life to the fullest. There is nothing more mesmerizing than being regaled with stories of Judge Parker's great adventures. How many times have we seen the twinkle in his eye and his broad smile as he says, well, let me tell you, whether it's skiing with his children and his grandchildren, fishing with his friends, enjoying a dinner party with his colleagues, traveling around the globe with his wonderful spouse, those are all the many things that Judge Parker has always looked forward to doing when he wasn't working, of course. Each time he recounts an adventure, he makes us all feel like we're there, enjoying the great company, the good food, or the magical place he discovered. But more importantly, I've come to realize that through these stories, Judge Parker is teaching us yet another lesson about the importance of life, about the value of family, about the treasure of friendship, about the beauty and joy that life offers. So whether it is in the land of enchantment that I didn't get to today or beyond, now that you're fully retired, Judge Parker, I wish you many more great adventures. We're all waiting to hear about them. I wish you all the best and Godspeed in your retirement. Thank you.
Next, we'll hear from our colleague, Judge Bruce Black, who served as a district judge in this district from 1996 to 2017. Judge Black.
Happy birthday, Jim. Other than the family, I probably have known Jim longer than just about anybody here. I had the good fortune to meet him over 50 years ago in the fall of 1971, when the model firm brought my wife and I out for an interview. Jim and several of the young partners were assigned to show us what a fun town Albuquerque was. They took us to the elegant Charlie's Back Door for dinner, and then we went to the Caravan East. I think I could safely say, as a kid from inner city Detroit who had a wife from Grosse Pointe, neither of us had ever seen anything quite like the Caravan East. Jim and Flo cut a mean rug, and I got a pretty good idea the first time that Jim was a serious athlete. I see he has his ski poles with him today, so he may be getting ready to take up the slopes again. He's passed that on to Roger and Pam, both of whom are excellent skiers. Roger played baseball at a top level college, and he has a grandson that played football somewhere at college in Colorado. I have, more importantly, had the chance to be mentored by Jim on 2 occasions. I did take the job at Madro, where he was a relatively new partner, and had the chance to learn from him as a trial lawyer. He was a top-notch trial lawyer who had great intensity, and he really cared about his clients and the results. I know it'll be hard for those of you who know him only as Gentleman Jim, but when he was a trial lawyer, he had an intensity that was hard to match. I remember stories and firsthand experiences of him ripping a phone out of the wall and slamming a door so hard that he broke an oak door. Jim also has a great ability to concentrate and focus on details. I think the best story regarding that is when he was fishing with his friend Leroy Hansen, our colleague. A brown bear came bounding down the stream. Jim was carefully concentrating on making sure his fly got to dance on the water in the appropriate way. And Leroy was screaming a warning, but the stream was too loud and Jim couldn't hear it. The bear passed within 2 yards of Jim, who never noticed. Jim was also my mentor on the bench. I tried my last jury trial in this courtroom in front of Jim. And then when on the state bench, when I came to the federal bench, whenever I had a question, Jim was the one I consulted. He was the one I'd go to if there was no UJI jury instruction on the issue, and how to pick a jury, what to do with a hung jury, all the things that a new trial judge needs to know. I was reminded just yesterday, watching a show on PBS, how Jim is a symbol of justice in this state and in this courtroom. The PBS show Taming New Mexico, which they reran last night, shows Jim toward the end of it coming into this courtroom. He is definitely a long shadow over the bar and bench of this state. I took my oath to be a federal judge in this courtroom administered by the Honorable James A. Parker, and I can think of no more fitting tribute than having this courtroom named after you, Jim. Congratulations. Buena suerte. Vaya con Dios.
Our next speaker was also supposed to be here today, but because of travel and COVID type issues, he's going to be appearing by Zoom. So I'll introduce Senior United States District Judge Robert Brack, who joined the court in 2003. And then I believe it was in the summer of 2018, took senior status and continues to sit and hear cases in Las Cruces. Judge Brack.
Thank you, Chief. Thanks so much for this opportunity. And thank you to Jim and to Jay and to all those present for allowing me to this little role in this historic day. I'm really sorry. Sheila and I are both sorry not to be able to be there with you today. Like so many other things in the last couple of years, COVID had different plans. We were going to be there, and Sheila joins me in wishing you a happy birthday, Jim, and and sending along a big hug. There's great joy in this place on this day as we gather to celebrate a lifetime of service to a noble profession, to reflect on this heroic figure, and to dedicate this courtroom. I'm honored, humbled, and not just a little intimidated to play a small part in this grand occasion. As I begin to celebrate my friend and colleague, James A. Parker, I give fair warning and full disclosure. I am no disinterested witness, not even hardly. Because you see, Jim is a hero of mine, one of only a handful of men and women in my life who, by virtue of their character, accomplishments, and example, have given shape to my life. So this is my premise this afternoon. If he isn't the hero of everyone here, either you don't know him well enough or your standards are too high. In support of my premise, I'd ask you to consider these facts, which are not in dispute. Jim has spent more years in the service of this court than any other. And if that's off by a few days, as the chief discussed earlier, I'll let the record speak to that. And long after it was comfortable for Jim, he kept coming to Las Cruces to help us out down here. Jim is insatiably curious. I recall him spending hours as we drove to Durango one time, reading and studying the Affordable Care Act, because he was interested and wasn't going to stop until he understood its subtleties. I don't have such curiosity, frankly. I was so impressed. Jim's an engineer by temperament and training, and I'll have a story about that in just a moment. Jim was a successful, admired trial lawyer, as Judge Black has just described, and earlier by Chief Judge Johnson. Jim is humble and has an even-tempered disposition, a judicial temperament second to none. He has well earned that sobriquet, gentleman Jim Parker, that both Judge Cordero and Judge Black have referenced. Jim was a great athlete, and I'm not the first to mention that this afternoon. He was a distance runner when he still could. He can outfish anyone right-handed, and when his right shoulder gave out on him, he started fishing left-handed, and I'm sure can outfish anyone left-handed. In terms of skiing, I nearly did myself in trying to keep up with Jim on a black diamond run at Durango. I mean, I almost got a concussion trying to keep up with him. I hit the side of a mogul with my head. Jim is the toughest man I've ever known. It's no fluke that he has also earned the sobriquet Iron Man Jim Parker. I recall fly fishing with Jim on a windy, cold day in March on the Animas in Durango. The ambient temperature was about 40 degrees. The wind was blowing 20 miles an hour, and you can only imagine how frigid that water was. After a while, I gave up. I was so cold. I indicated to Jim further down the river, I'm done. I'm going to the car. I hurried to the car. I turned the heater on, and my teeth were still chattering 45 minutes later when Jim came up to the car. With his characteristic flair for understatement, Jim said, "It's getting a little chilly out there, Bob." And as he pulled his waders off, keep in mind, these are waders that were designed to keep the water out. Water came pouring out of the waders. They were full of water. And Jim said, "I must have a hole in these waders. I'll have to see to that." I still can't believe that to this day. His legs were purple. Jim is unfailingly generous with his time. He always takes your call. He was ever ready to assist with a project, to talk me off of a couple of ledges, and to teach me a difficult fly fishing knot. Incidentally, the reason they call it a double surgeon's knot is because it takes two surgeons to tie one. I know there's only a handful of you that get that joke, but Jim's one of them. Among the thousands of cases the judge was called upon to decide, I'd ask you to consider just two. One involved a little fish, and the other involved a Chinese scientist. Such is the random nature of the work that we do as judges. But in the one, the judge courageously protected the environment, and in the other, he took it upon himself to issue a very rare, very public apology for a wayward prosecution, and he courageously spoke truth to power. Jim took so seriously the admonition in our oath to administer justice without respect to persons and to do equal right to the poor and the rich. And there you have it. He's self-sacrificing, faithful, courageous, humble, superhuman strength and intelligence, all characteristics of an heroic figure, and each one perfectly displayed in the life and character of our hero this afternoon, Jim Parker. I'll conclude my remarks with a quirky story. There's a risk in telling this story because the story actually doesn't reflect very well on me, but I take the risk in attempting to make a point. Bear with me just a few more moments. Jim's an engineer by education, and I dare say by temperament. Precision is a big part of this man's daily diet. At the ranch, he loves to cut firewood. He's constantly in motion, so that's no surprise. But before he cuts that first piece of firewood, he knows exactly the length he needs. He's already measured the firebox and the grate, and he's probably done some sort of analysis on the draft qualities of the chimney. Anyway, he cuts that first piece precisely the length he needs, and then, of course, he cuts each succeeding piece that same length. Well, the result is one of the neatest appearing wood piles ever. The front of the pile is completely flush. Why wouldn't it be? Each piece is exactly the same length. But here's the part that doesn't reflect well on me. I, and others, frankly, and you know who you are, would walk by the woodpile occasionally and quietly and without Jim's notice. We'd pull one or two of the pieces of the firewood out of the stack, just a little, just an inch or two, just to test how long it would take Jim, one, to notice the irregularity, and two, to set it right. It never took long. But here's the point. That first piece of firewood was a standard by which all subsequent pieces were measured. Chief, honored guests, I believe with all of my heart that when God set out to create the optimum judge, the standard by which future generations of judges would be measured, he gave us Jim Parker. In terms of temperament, intellect, courage, and a tireless pursuit of justice, he is your standard. And we owe it to future generations of lawyers and jurists, both to tell the judge's story again and again so they too can benefit from his example, his standard. Winston Churchill famously said, "Those that refuse to learn from history are doomed to repeat it." A lesser known philosopher, Kobe Bryant, once said that we must learn from greatness. The implication being, of course, if we don't learn from greatness, we're doomed to mediocrity. Let the naming of this beautiful historical courtroom in honor of our friend be a blessing to future generations and a challenge to them and to us and all to be great, even as he has been. Thank you, Chief, and thank you to you, Jim.
Next, we'll hear from Jim's son, Roger, and his daughter, Pam.
Well, there's a few common themes here today. Our family sincerely appreciates this magnificent recognition. We would also like to thank Chief Judge Johnson and all the other judicial colleagues for honoring our father in this way. Also, we owe many thanks to our stepmother, Jay, Paul Baca, as already mentioned, our father's loyal courtroom reporter and family friend for many decades. We would also like to thank everyone else who worked so diligently to make today happen.
I was in graduate school and my brother had started his oil business in Denver when our dad was nominated to the federal bench by President Reagan. I remember being very excited to attend his Senate confirmation hearing in Washington, D.C., and then his swearing-in ceremony right here in this courtroom. Over the years, I've always been interested in learning about the cases he presided over, and on occasion, watching him in action. I've loved visiting this courtroom every time I come to Albuquerque and showing it off to whomever is with me, whether it's my kids, my friends, or other family members. It's perfectly fitting that this courtroom is being named after our dad because it is such a special place where he truly belongs. Now that he won't be coming to work here every day, his name will still represent his everlasting presence and legacy.
My sister and I have often joked that when we were growing up, the atmosphere in our home was clearly very streamlined, almost judicial-like. Even though my sister and I were adults when he officially became a judge, both of us sensed that he was grooming himself to ultimately become a federal judge when we were much younger. As an example, the average weekend included very detailed questioning and interrogation on a regular basis, especially on Saturday and Sunday mornings after our weekend antics when we were in high school. This was usually followed with very distinct instructions, jury-like instructions, as to what was acceptable or not. Even though he was on the bench for approximately 34 years, Pam and I have experienced it for more like the past 50 years.
His knowledge of the law and his quest for fairness and justice seep into everything that he does. His work ethic set an example and expectation of excellence in us. It has never crossed our minds to do less than our very best in any endeavor, and we learned that from our father.
You've all spoken here today of his stellar career and his impact as a judge. Beyond that is another important measure of the man. He has always focused on his family, showing us love and attention, and providing special life experiences for us. After our mother died almost 17 years ago, he went out of his way to be a wonderful grandfather to all of his grandkids and step-grandkids, and there are many. Many of them have traveled here today from various states to honor Grandpa Jim.
On every special occasion, birthdays, Christmas, etc., he would give each grandchild a family heirloom or trinket or some item from his and/or our mom's history with a handwritten note telling the story of that particular gift in our family. He's also working hard to record our family heritage from past to present and to give his future generations an understanding of our ancestry. We're thankful that he has a great partner in Jay with that tremendous task.
Don't let his diligent work habits and earnest attitude about his position as a federal judge lead you to believe that he's serious all the time. In fact, he has a marvelous sense of humor. We would like to leave you today with one of our favorite stories that our mother used to tell. Apparently, on the night of his graduation from law school, first in his class, of course, he was substantially enjoying the celebration and was fueled by an abundance of scotch. And with a half-empty bottle in his hand at the well-known Schultz Garden in Austin, Texas, he got up on stage, or maybe it was a table, and he led the crowded room in a rousing rendition of Onward, Christian Soldiers. With that, Dad, onward, you Christian soldier. Thank you to everyone here today. This is truly a very special event.
Before we proceed with the unveiling, I wanted to say a few words about Judge Leroy Hansen. He is in Arizona and could not be here today, but he certainly approved what we were doing. And when Lydia Piper kind of sketched out how this was going to look initially, this wall over here to the right of the doors was totally blank. And several of us came to the conclusion right away that we need to put Judge Hansen's portrait out there because of Judge Parker's and Judge Hansen's longtime friendship. And when Judge Parker started practicing law with the Modrell firm in the fall of 1962, it wasn't that long afterwards that he got to know another lawyer in town named Leroy Hansen, and they became the best of friends. And I realized this when this past fall, when Judge Hansen was honored as a distinguished graduate at the UNM by the UNM School of Law. And there was a video tribute to Judge Hansen, and Judge Parker was one of the main speakers. And I remember Judge Parker talking about that Leroy Hansen was his closest friend. And this year, that friendship has gone on for 60 years. I also want to share a story, again, about Judge Hansen and Judge Parker. And this was last spring when Judge Parker was in the hospital, and I had earlier that morning had talked with Judge Hansen, and Judge Hansen expressed his concerns about Judge Parker's health, and Judge Hansen told me to be sure and tell Judge Parker some words or some advice that Judge Hansen had. And so I was talking with Jim, and of course, Jim sounded a little down, and who wouldn't be? You're in the hospital during a pandemic and you can't see any family and you're there by yourself. And so I told Jim, I said, I talked to Leroy this morning. I said, Leroy is worried about you. And Jim said, well, what did Leroy say? And I told Jim, I said, you want to know exactly what he said? And Jim says, sure. And so I said, all right, I'm going to quote Leroy. Parker likes to do things on the cheap. So tell him he needs to hire some good quality healthcare personnel when he gets home because he can afford it. And when I told that to Jim, this laugh came out. And I thought there's a lot of meaning in that expression. Laughter is the best medicine in the world. So Jim came home not long afterwards, and recently Jay told me that there's a physical therapist that's really been working with Jim, and he's really getting his physical strength back. So I'm thinking, Jim, you must have listened and followed Leroy's advice. So at this time, we'll have the unveiling, and I'll ask Jim's two oldest grandsons, James Parker and Wesley Jones, if you would, to please do the unveiling. So hereafter, this courtroom will be known as the James A. Parker Historical Courtroom. And in case anyone thinks that it should be historic instead of historical, talk to Judge Parker, because he researched that at length, and the proper terminology is historical. In closing, I've got a few more remarks, and if everyone will bear with me. 20 years ago, when I was a new judge on the court, I told my chamber staff, and my exact words were, when I hang it up, I hope people will say I did half as good a job as Jim Parker, and if they did, I would take that as a real compliment. I meant that then, and I mean it now. But in addition to learning the ropes of how to be a trial judge, I learned a lot more from being around Jim Parker. I learned how one loves and supports a spouse battling cancer. I observed how one deals with loss and grief while continuing to live life to the fullest. I think some of my most memorable conversations with Jim Parker have been riding the chair back up to the top of the mountain at a ski area. And I remember when Jim used to talk about the earlier days when the goal was to make as many runs as you could, so it would come out to be $1 a run based on your lift ticket price. But obviously lift ticket prices are way beyond that point now. But we were doing our best to get to where we were going at $1 a run. But one of my most memorable conversations, Jim and I had slipped over from Durango to Wolf Creek, and snow was a little better there, and we thought we'd try that out. And I want to say maybe 2008 or 2009, and we were riding up the chair, and Jim mentioned that he had reconnected with a friend from college days at Rice, and that she had experienced losing a spouse to cancer, and so they had reconnected. And then at some point, I had the privilege of meeting Janice, or as everyone knows, Jay. And then it was like in late June of 2012. It was a Thursday evening. I get a call, and it's Jim. And of course, anyone who's ever received a call, he said, "Well, Chip, this is Jim Parker," and that very distinctive voice. And he asked me, he said, "Are you going to be around this weekend?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Would you be willing to do a wedding ceremony?" I said, "Well, yeah." I said, "Whose?" And he goes, "Mine." And so it turns out it wasn't over the weekend, but the following Monday, I got a call over the weekend. He said, "Can you come over to the courthouse here at lunch on," it was Monday, I think maybe July the 2nd. So I come here, come through the elevators and come into the courtroom, and there was me and 5 other people. And of course, the bride and groom, and then the witnesses and close friends, Dan and Kay Sisk and John De La Rosa. So I was very honored to perform to be the officiant. And let's see, I believe it's this coming July, it'll be your 10th anniversary. And so I know I speak for everyone when I say that we're all very pleased that, the 2 of you have been able to find love and companionship together as you continue in life's journey. And one thing I have learned too is that Jay has something in common with Jim, and that is that zest for living life to the fullest. So thank you for your service to the district. I hope you will. Again, I'm waiting for that phone call from you this year saying you want to do that 60 days and I'll be, and I'm going to bet that it's going to happen. And thank you for touching the lives of so many people in such positive ways. And finally, I guess I should say, in the interest of due process, I feel obligated to offer you rebuttal closing if you wish to make any remarks. And if so, I can pass the phone, but I'll leave that up to you, or I'll pass the phone.
Test 1, 2. Can you hear me?
In case you didn't hear what I said previously, I wanted to thank everyone who spoke today. It was very touching, and I really feel honored by what has transpired here and the naming of the courtroom after me. It's a courtroom I used for 34 years and have a lot of fond memories of it. But again, I appreciate everything that has been done to make this a wonderful occasion. And I want to thank our chief in particular for arranging all of this. So thank you again.
Well, thank you. And with that, we can adjourn, and the Federal Bar Association has provided food and beverages. So please, everyone, take advantage of that. For those who are here, thank you for attending. For those on Zoom, thank you for watching. And with that, everyone have a good day.